Oh, yes. Okay. Let me just tweet the link and we'll get going. Hello and welcome to the Chasing Perfection Pregame Show. UConn taking on High Point in the first round of the NCAA tournament tonight at 8 p.m. on ESPN at the Alamo Dome in San Antonio. So we're here to preview the matchup for you. NCAA tournament, we made it. We got this far in the season. We're finally back in the NCAA tournament after last year didn't happen. So, Megan, just what are your initial thoughts on being here at all? Because that's an accomplishment in of it itself.
Yeah, for sure. Just excited to see the tournament get started. There's been a lot of great games today, and excited for UConn to get out there and play. I think that's probably the most exciting part about today's game is just seeing them get in their first tournament action of the season.
Right. So they're taking on 16 seed High Point, winner of the Big South Conference, won the conference's regular season and tournament titles, really ran away with the tournament title. They didn't lose, or no game was closer than 16 points. So pretty solid 16 seed coming in for the most part. You kind of previewed them on the UConn blog. What can you tell us about what to expect tonight?
Yeah, they're going to take a lot of threes. They've taken over 45% of their shots from three this season. So going to be a lot of three-point shots. They hit a lot of them too. I think they're shooting about a 35% clip on the season. So pretty efficient from beyond that three-point line. But as long as the Huskies can kind of run them off that, I don't think they're really going to have any problems. CD compared them to a lot of the Big East teams that they see, like Villanova, DePaul, that shoot a lot of threes. So I think we're going to see probably a similar game to what we saw in some of those Big East contests, which should be no problem for UConn. They're pretty used to that from the season.
Right. When I was reading through it, it honestly just feels like a DePaul team on steroids, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just even more threes than your typical DePaul. I think they're second in the nation in both three-point attempts and makes on the season. So a lot of three-point shots.
Right. And I feel like for the most part, UConn's defended the three-point line pretty well. And especially considering High Point doesn't have a ton of size, if any, inside, UConn should be able to press pretty well out on the perimeter. So who are some players on UConn that you think will be impact players defensively tonight?
Well, I think the obvious answer is probably Kristen Williams. We saw her shut down the best players in all of the Big East tournament games, so expect her to be doing that again tonight, guarding on the perimeter. I think Nika Mule is probably also going to have a big impact there. She's really strong defensively as well. Try to pick the pocket of some of those High Point players and get the Huskies going in transition, which always helps the flow of their offense as well. So I think those two, but Avina Westbrook will be a part of that as well, I think.
Looking at the numbers, her hoop stats had a projected margin of victory for UConn at 29.4, right?
I think so, yeah.
That honestly feels kind of low, and I know it's a 16 seed and all, but since UConn's been playing in these 1-16 games, there's been 21 of them since 1994. Every single one of them, except the first one, has been a margin of at least 30 points. And really, recently, it's been nowhere close. I mean, their last game that they played, that was a 16 team. They won by 88 when they just absolutely killed St. Francis. St. Francis team that liked to take a lot of three-pointers. I'm not predicting that UConn's going to have 94 points at halftime tonight, but it feels like one of those games where, depending on how the shots fall or don't fall, it could get out of hand kind of quickly. But that 29.4 just feels low. The next closest since pretty much the last 15 years was 36 points. So even that's 7 points higher than the projected margin of victory.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see it get higher than that. I think especially UConn just tends to come into the NCAA tournament locked in at kind of a different level, and I'm sure that plays into why those first round margin of victories have been so high in the past few years. But then also, I think you're looking at a High Point team that's kind of comparable to maybe not the top of the Big East conference, but some of those second tier teams like Villanova, the ratings are right around that point. So I think it is a little bit tougher competitor than maybe we typically see as a 16 seed in this tournament.
Right. I mean, if Villanova got into this tournament, I feel like they'd be at worst maybe like a 12 or a 13 seed, but it feels like I don't understand why High Point would be ranked so low just based on the entire body of work that they have. I don't know if maybe just the Big South Conference is weaker historically, or if it's just the lack of non-conference games made it difficult for the selection committee to seed these teams. But it just doesn't feel like a typical 16 seed. A 16 seed is normally someone, at least in my view, that's barely getting in. Like, I mean, obviously they're only getting in because they won the automatic bid, but just someone who's towards the bottom of the country anyways. It just feels a little too high to be a 16 seed.
Yeah, and I haven't deep dived on what the rest of the seeds are in the automatic qualifiers, but agreed, it does seem like a team that might be a little bit better than they're seeded. I mean, I don't think that makes a big difference in terms of this game for UConn. They're going to come away with it pretty easily either way, but I think that's definitely something to keep an eye on, and is that it's a little bit more challenging of a team, I think, than we typically see in that number 16 spot.
Right, but also that probably just benefits UConn more, because really, what do you gain out of beating a team by 200 points like you did against St. Francis, or even in the past? I think the year prior, UConn like set its own NCAA first round record with 116 points against Albany, and then just did it again the next year. So like, you don't gain anything out of those games besides getting some extra minutes for the end of the bench. So the fact that it is a better team and someone that might at least make UConn sweat a little bit, that's way better than playing, the America East champion or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I think a little tougher competition in the first round is just more of a warm-up for what they're going to see come Tuesday, assuming they win, which I think would be a pretty historic upset if they didn't. So we can just go on ahead and say that they'll probably be playing on Tuesday. So, yeah, I think just a better adjustment to tournament play than kind of facing a team that's going to be a lot worse than what they see on Thursday or Tuesday.
One of my least favorite takes just in general is that Mississippi State beating UConn is the greatest upset in women's college basketball history, because it was a Final Four game between a 1 and a 2 seed, which is just completely ridiculous. Yes, if High Point won this game, I would be leading the charge to say it's the greatest upset in UConn history. I think, honestly, the most drama that's going to be in this game is whether or not UConn can get over that 29.4 margin of victory. Other than that, it's obviously not going to be a very close game.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's more about looking at kind of what have they improved on since the Big East tournament. This is the first time we've seen them in action since in about 2 weeks now. So just kind of seeing them back out there on the floor and what they look like heading into the tournament.
Yeah, for sure. We appreciate all the comments coming in on our live stream from everyone. So just a couple storylines going into this game. I think the biggest one, UConn's going to be without Gino and Shea Ralph. UConn's never even been in an NCAA tournament game without Gino. Luckily, Chris Daly is going to be on the sideline taking over acting head coaching duties. 10-0 as a head coach, has already won 2 championships, Big East titles way back. First was in 1989. The second was in 1997. So obviously she can handle herself as a head coach. I am a little interested, though, just to see what the dynamics of the bench look like, because in the past, there's been Gino's missed time these last 2 seasons, but CD's been there and the rest of the staff has been there. But now it's not just Gino down, it's Shea Ralph down as well. So the video coordinator, Ben Cantor, stepping in with some assistant coaching duties. I'm curious to see if he's going to even be sitting on the bench as an acting assistant coach, or if he's just helping out in practice or something. And I'm also just looking forward to seeing what it's like with CD running the sidelines, and at the same time, how much input Jamel Elliott has as a former assistant or as a former head coach, because when Gino missed that time last year with the surgery for diverticulitis, I hope I said that right, I don't think Jamel Elliott was on the staff yet. It was still Jasmine Lister there. So it's just a lot of turnover in a very short amount of time. So it's just going to be an interesting dynamic to watch.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's definitely something to keep an eye on. And of course, CD's been with Gino all the way through, so I don't think we're going to see too much different kind of having her on the sidelines today. But I'll just be interested to see if there's any kind of slight changes in how they run the rotation and things like that with her on the sideline versus Gino being there.
Right, because Gino made the comment in his availability, I think that was yesterday or 2 days ago, whenever that happened, that CD is much more consistent and much less volatile, was his word. She doesn't just kind of blow up and have giant mood swings like he does. Again, his words. So if it's someone like maybe Mir McLean is a good example where we've kind of seen Mir's playing time go up and down throughout the season, where some games she's been in double-digit minutes, other games she doesn't show up until the last 3 or 4 minutes of the game. So I'm interested to see if maybe there's more structure to it and if it's more of a balanced thing as opposed to just, going by feel and, all right, well, this is happening, let's put this player in, or I don't like the way that player looks out there, I'm going to put this player in for them. I think the rotation, as you said, is going to be an interesting thing to watch.
For sure. Definitely something to keep an eye on.
Also, secondly, they're playing in the Alamo Dome. It's actually a really interesting setup if you haven't seen it on Twitter, but they have 2 courts set up. I think it's a north and a south and a very large curtain separating the two. So I think the Syracuse South Dakota State game is supposed to be over before UConn starts, right?
Yeah.
How much time's left in that one?
Yeah, I think that one actually just ended. I'm looking over at my
Okay.
over there.
So it's not going to be.
It's actually South Carolina and Mercer that's playing on the court on the other side
is?
right now. But
Okay.
that one is, I think it's in the 4th quarter, so it is wrapping up. So it should be over before UConn tips off, it looks like.
Okay. Yeah, but just the fact that they're playing in the Alamo Dome, a football stadium, something I don't think they've ever done before, at least not since I've covered the team recently. So I'm kind of curious to see if that affects their shooting, because it's not like this is a great shooting team for UConn to begin with. And also for High Point. High Point really relies on their shooting. And I think just if you're a UConn fan, the very easy example to point to about shooting in a football stadium is the 2011 national championship for men's basketball, UConn Butler, where just neither team could find the basket, and the depth perception of the players behind with just so much space behind the basket. I'm interested to see if that's an issue, and I think it just in general will help UConn that they're going to be playing at this site the entire time. But I wouldn't be surprised if both teams come out and struggle to find the basket through the first few minutes because of that.
Yeah, I agree. It might take a little bit of an adjustment. Of course, they'll be able to get some shots up before the game, so hopefully that helps. But I think in UConn's case, it's a fine game for them to have some trouble finding the basket, right? They're not going to get into too much trouble. If it takes them a little while to get going, or if they miss a lot of shots, they'll still be fine in this one. So if anything, it's preparation for the next kind of later rounds where they're going to have harder competition and need to hit those baskets. They'll be ready for it. Where teams that aren't playing in this arena in kind of some of their earlier games are going to have a little bit of a disadvantage, I think, heading in with that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we kind of saw in the Big East tournament too, UConn really struggled shooting in those first 2 games. And they just went inside and completely dominated in the post with Olivia Nelson-Adota, Aaliyah Edwards, everyone else chipping in too. I mean, I think one game, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was somewhere in the range of UConn took like 50 shots. And I want to say like 10 of them were from 3 and like 30 of them were layups. It was some very high ratio of layups. So even if those shots don't fall, UConn has a huge size advantage. Olivia Nelson-Adota should have her way inside. Aaliyah Edwards should just bully players, as she always does, even against players her own size, but especially a team like High Point that just has no one that, I mean, you can combine 2 players on High Point and they're still like half the size of Aaliyah Edwards. So that's going to be a huge advantage for UConn to exploit too if they can't get those shots to fall.
For sure, yeah. I think they're going to have no problem going inside. They could probably go inside and score on every play this game. I hope that they try to take some of those more outside shots and get that going, because I think they've got matchups most likely coming down the stretch where going inside to Nelson-Adota and Aaliyah Edwards is going to be trickier. So they've got to be able to get it going from kind of all areas later on in the tournament. But they've got an easy kind of advantage inside today if they need it.
Right. I mean, that thought just went out of my head. I mean, yeah, I think the difference between their shooting is going to be whether it's a 30-point game or a 50-point game. If they have a good shooting night, High Point has no chance to even get within that predicted margin of victory. So, yeah, I think that's really going to be the biggest difference tonight. It could be more of an issue in their next game, but even still, it's probably more of a problem down the road where they need that outside shooting. And then just the last thing to look for, how do the freshmen respond? I think we saw in the Big East tournament that they responded very well. They really seemed to handle the pressure well and honestly kind of elevated their games because of the pressure. But the NCAA tournament's a different thing. The fact that they're playing in not such a big event, but literally such a large venue. do they get overwhelmed by that? Does the fact that they haven't played in 2 weeks affect them, or even just the quarantine and having really not been able to do a whole lot over the last probably 5 days? It'll be interesting to see if they just kind of carry that swagger on from the Big East tournament, or if it takes them a little bit of time to settle in.
Yeah, I think in some ways, because this team is so young, the fact that there's no fans this year is going to be a little bit of an advantage, just because you don't have all that like added extra kind of pressure of being in a sold out arena for all of these games, which I think makes it even more obvious how big of a stage that they're on. I think the way that the arenas are kind of empty, especially these first 2 games, I think it's just friends and family, and then it'll still be limited fans later on, just kind of takes away some of that atmosphere that it typically comes with the NCAA tournament that might freak freshmen out a little bit, whereas it's still a big stage and they know that in their minds, but it's not going to be as obvious when they're on the court that that's what's going on.
Right. I mean, this freshman class all season long has kind of proven that they're different. So I feel like the whole, can the freshmen handle the bright lights? I personally don't really think it's going to be much of an issue, but it is something to watch at the very least.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, they're in a good spot today, right? Even if a couple of the freshmen have a rough night, they're going to be fine. So they've got this game under their belt. They'll be more adjusted for the next game. And I think that's, the good thing about being in a number 1 seed where you've got 16 seed in your first game.
Right. Not like any other teams that maybe UConn is familiar with, that they play their first game and just can't shoot for the life of them, and they get knocked out of the tournament in the first round. I don't know who I could be talking about. But yeah, UConn definitely has a lot more wiggle room than other teams.
Yes.
All right. So to close out the show, I'm going to ask you for any prediction for this game. But first, if you're watching this, drop your prediction in the comments. So, Megan, give me any prediction. It can be points, margin of victory, anything that you imagine for this.
I think UConn wins it by at least 40. And I think also that the defense is going to be really solid. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I think they hold High Point to probably under 50 points.
Mm-hmm. That's a pretty strong prediction. I have a feeling that Paige Beckers is just going to go off tonight because, I don't want to say that she's played poorly because she obviously hasn't, but it's just funny when you look at her stat sheet and the first thought in my head is like, oh, she only had 17 points, like a tough night for her. And it's like, okay, like 17 points. So I have a feeling she's just going to hit a couple shots early and it's just going to build from there. And she's just going to go off for, let's say, 27 points, going 4 of 6 from 3.
Nice.
That's my official prediction.
Quite the NCAA tournament debut for her, so we shall see.
Well, that's going to do it for the first edition of the Chasing Perfection pregame show. We're going to at least try to do it before every single NCAA tournament game, as long as that goes. Let us know what you thought about it, either on Twitter or anywhere else that you can reach us. But stay tuned throughout the game for updates from me and Megan on Twitter. You can follow Megan on Twitter at Megan Gower. You can follow me on Twitter if you didn't come through Twitter at Daniel V. Connolly. So